One Saturday morning, I decided to surprise Raymond at his apartment in Ikoyi. He had mentioned he'd be working from home that day. I remember humming a love song as I carried jollof rice and plantain in a food flask, wearing a simple white dress and perfume that smelled like new beginnings. When I knocked, the door opened, but not to Raymond. A woman, wearing his t-shirt and nothing else, stood before me. Behind her, I saw him, frozen, guilt written all over his face. I still hear the sound of that food flask hitting the floor. Let me take you through my background and struggles before getting this point. Please click the subscribe button and like. Thanks. My name is Mabel, and if you had told me when I was a little girl sitting on a cracked veranda in Ibadan, watching the rain slide off rusted rooftops, that one day I would stand tall in boardrooms and walk across red carpets, I would have laughed through my hunger. Because back then, dreams felt like luxury. Hope felt like a story reserved for other people. I was born on a humid April morning, the kind when the air feels thick enough to swallow. My mother said the sky cried before I did. Maybe the heavens already knew how much rain would follow my life. My father was a proud man, too proud sometimes, and he had dreams that our tiny one-room apartment could not contain. He worked as a mechanic in Rugby, fixing engines that roared louder than his own laughter. My mother was a trader in the local market, selling onions and peppers with a grace that could make even poverty look beautiful. We weren't rich, but we were whole, until the year my father got into an accident. He was working under a client's truck when it slipped off its jack. I still remember the scream that split the air. That night, the world stopped for us. My mother's cries filled the small room, and I, at just 8 years old, learned that death doesn't always knock. Sometimes it crashes in uninvited and refuses to leave. After my father's death, everything became a storm. Bills, rent, food. Each day was another fight for survival. My mother aged quickly, her hands trembling each time she counted coins. She would whisper prayers between tears, asking God not for riches but for strength. And somehow, He gave her just enough to keep us going. School became my escape. I was that quiet girl who always sat in the front row, hungry but focused. My uniform was always neatly washed, even when it was threadbare. My mother said, "Mabel, education is your ticket out of this cage." So, I clung to that like it was oxygen. By the time I turned 12, we moved to Lagos, chasing opportunity that kept hiding behind locked doors. Lagos was loud, fast, and unforgiving. It had no time for pity. We lived in a face me I face you building in Mushin, where life was an orchestra of crying babies, generators, gossip, and dreams too heavy to fly. My mother sold everything from fruits to sachet water, and I helped her after school. I remember one evening vividly. Rain was falling again. I sat by the window watching drops race down the glass, and I whispered, "One day, I'll leave this place. One day, I'll make you proud, Mama." She smiled, but I could see the tiredness in her eyes, the kind that words can't fix. When I got into University of Lagos, it felt like heaven itself had opened its gates. I was the first in my family to ever go that far. We celebrated with Accra and pap that night, laughing as if the world had finally decided to give us a break. But success has a way of coming with its own tests. At school, I felt both invisible and exposed. My clothes screamed poverty, and my accent betrayed where I came from. I watched other girls glide around campus in expensive wigs and perfumes that lingered long after they left a room. I envied them, not for what they had, but for how effortless life seemed to be for them. That was where I met Chucks, the first man who made me believe love could heal. He was handsome in a quiet, confident way. He didn't come with flashy cars or fake promises. He saw me, the real me. Or so I thought. Chucks would walk me to class, share his food when mine finished too early, and hold my hand in the library like I was something fragile worth protecting. For the first time since my father's death, I let my heart rest. But love, I would later learn, can also be a storm. When I was in my final year, I got pregnant. I remember the day I found out. My hands trembled as I held that test strip in the cramped bathroom stall. I stared at those 2 lines until my vision blurred. Fear gripped me like cold water. Chuck's face flashed in my mind, and I prayed he'd hold my hand and say, "We'll face this together." But life doesn't always follow the script we write. When I told him, he went silent for what felt like an eternity. Then he whispered, "Mabel, I'm not ready." Those 4 words broke something inside me. He left 2 weeks later. The world around me collapsed. My mother cried when I told her. "After everything, Mabel? After all our struggles?" she said, her voice breaking between anger and grief. I wanted to disappear. I dropped out for a semester, working as a cashier in a small eatery in Surulere, my belly growing as I served customers who barely looked at me. But even in that darkness, there was light. My coworker, Anidora, would always tell me, "Don't let shame kill you. Babies don't stop destinies. They can even spark them." Her words stuck. When my daughter, Annabel, was born, everything changed. I looked into her eyes and saw the reflection of every fight I had ever survived. I made a promise to her that night as I held her close. We will not drown. Not in this city. Not in this life. I returned to school 6 months later, balancing lectures, motherhood, and work. Some nights, I would study with Annabel sleeping beside me, her tiny breaths keeping rhythm with my dreams. It was hard, harder than I can ever describe. But it was also holy. Every tear felt like it watered something deep inside me. When I finally graduated 2nd class upper, my mother cried like it was her wedding day. I could see pride dancing in her eyes, a pride that poverty could never steal. But the journey was far from over. Graduation didn't bring jobs. Lagos doesn't hand opportunities to the desperate, it makes them fight for it. I sent out countless CVs, stood in endless queues under the sun, and heard, "We'll get back to you more times than I can count." I almost gave up. Until one day, a small creative agency in Lekki called me in for an interview. I wore my best thrift store blouse and borrowed shoes from a friend. I was nervous but determined. When I walked into that office and saw the sleek computers, glass walls, and polished floors, I felt like I had stepped into another world. And somehow I fit in. That job became my turning point. I started as a content assistant, learning everything I could: copywriting, branding, marketing. I stayed late, volunteered for extra projects, and turned my pain into passion. My boss once told me, "Mabel, you work like someone who has seen hell." I smiled and said, "I have." But I refused to stay there. And that was the truth. When I got that first job in Lekki, it felt like I had crossed a river most people drown in. I still remember the smell of the office air freshener, lavender and ambition. Every morning, I would wake up at 4:30 a.m. in Mushin, bathe in cold water, strap Annabel on my back, and board 2 Danfos before sunrise. I'd drop her at a neighbor's house before heading to work, praying she wouldn't cry too long when I left. My life became a dance between deadlines and diapers, between PowerPoint slides and baby cries. I was exhausted, constantly on edge, but I was grateful. Lagos teaches you that gratitude isn't about comfort, it's about survival. I remember the first time my salary came, 60,000 Nigerian nairas. I held that brown envelope like it was gold. I didn't even want to open it. I just pressed it to my chest and cried. That night, I bought suya for Mama, milk for Annabel, and small perfume for myself. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted to smell like victory. Over the next 2 years, I worked like a woman possessed. I attended night classes to improve my digital skills, learning Photoshop, video editing, and even social media marketing. I became the go-to person for everything creative. My boss began to trust me with campaigns for big brands, banks, fashion labels, NGOs. It was during one of those projects that I met Raymond. He wasn't like Chuck's. He was older, polished, confident. The kind of man who looked like he had never known struggle. He worked for a multinational company and had a way of making every woman in the room feel seen. But when he looked at me, it felt different. Anytime we had cause to, he would say, "Mabel, your ideas are gold." At first, I thought it was flattery. Then one night, after a long day of shooting a commercial in Victoria Island, he offered to drive me home. The car ride was quiet at first. Lagos lights flashed past us, neon chaos life. Then he asked me about my story. Not the resume version, but the real one. And for some reason, I told him everything about my father, my mother, my struggles, my daughter. He listened, really listened. And when I finished, he said softly, "You're the kind of woman men are too afraid to love properly because you've survived what they couldn't." Those words sank deep into my bones. We began seeing each other more often. He would surprise me with lunch at the office, send me motivational quotes in the morning, and sometimes pick me up after work. He met Annabel and treated her with such gentleness that my heart began to believe again. For a while, life felt golden. But Lagos, oh Lagos, that city doesn't let you rest too long in comfort. It always has a twist waiting in the dark. One Saturday morning, I decided to surprise Raymond at his apartment in Ikoyi. He had mentioned he'd be working from home that day. I remember humming a love song as I carried jollof rice and plantain in a food flask, wearing a simple white dress and perfume that smelled like new beginnings. When I knocked, the door opened, but not to Raymond. A woman, wearing his t-shirt and nothing else, stood before me. Behind